Thank you very much for coming here. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Inaki Garay. I've been an Erlang programmer for 3 years now, and I love non-traditional paradigms. And I'm from Argentina. So my name is Inaki, and I work at Inaka. That's actually my email. I have the best email in the company, but it's not my company. I'm not the founder. If you haven't heard of us, we started in 2010, and we were acquired by Erlang Solutions last year, and I've been with them since 2013. We build end-to-end applications in Erlang, Ruby, with web, iOS, and Android components. And we'd like to develop highly concurrent applications, such as Whisper or Tiger Text. And we're active contributors to the open source community. We really believe in giving back, and we love working out in the open. And this will be relevant further down the talk. So to give you a brief outline of my talk, there it is. I'm going to tell you a bit about my story. Not that it's very interesting, but it's like it ties in with what I came to say. We can have a little popularity contest, and I'll make the point that hiring is hard, although we already know that, and that training is easy. And what is our approach to training new hires? So where did I say I was from? This is Argentina, the other land down under. That's the province of Buenos Aires. The big dot is Buenos Aires, the capital, and I'm from that town, Bahía Blanca. So for scale, Bahía Blanca has about 300,000 inhabitants, and Buenos Aires has 11 million in the greater area. And there are about 8 to 10 Erlang developers. I work with 6 of them, and there aren't that many more because, believe me, we've looked. So I'm just a very humble and lonely programmer. I'm very happy to be here because this is actually the first time that I've met face-to-face with other Erlang programmers outside my company. So it's very gratifying to get to know like-minded people because it gives you the feeling that you're not alone in the world. And I feel that the same feeling that I've had on a personal level, we have as a community. Because the truth is that we are a small community, at least relative to other more mainstream languages. Has anyone ever seen the This OTP Life Tumblr? Raise your hands if you know it. Great. So this is like the highlight of my day is checking whether the Tumblr has been updated. And this is one that was posted by Tristan. Thank you, Tristan, for that one. So we're a very stable community. We've been here like forever, 30 years or so more, and we'll be here for another 30. But we're not comparable in size and recognition to other ones. And as developers, this is not always obvious. It's more obvious for the sales and marketing teams because they have to make the case sometimes of adopting Erlang for a project. There's nothing wrong with being a small community. Has anyone ever heard of APL or the K programming language? Yeah. So they're also, they move millions and millions in the financial sector, but heaven knows how few of them there are. So one issue with being a small community is finding new hires. When you want to have a new project, you need more developers. Where do you get them? Erlang is well known thanks to the functional programming revolution among developer circles. If you've been to Hacker News, Reddit, you know what it is, but not so much among managers. Now, last year there was a great talk by Garrett titled "Why the Cool Kids Don't Use Erlang," and he did what everyone should do in these cases, which is to do a survey and ask questions. One of the questions he asked was, "What challenges do you see in adopting Erlang for a project?" I'm going to steal another slide from him, because from his results, the foremost answer was finding developers. So how is Erlang doing lately? We can examine the bogus indexes that we all love, So TIOBE, if you don't know how it works, like I researched each one to see how they get their data. So supposedly TIOBE, they do web query results from the 25 main search engines, which is indexed by another search engine called Alexa. And Erlang is consistently year after year in the 50 to 100th rank. They don't list those because there's such a small difference. The first functional programming language to reach the top 20 was F#, unfortunately. So LangPop is another one. They use GitHub, Google Search, Olo, and Craigslist. They were last updated in 2013. So that's the latest data they have. Erlang is there. But at least we're there, right, on the top 30. The problem with the previous two is that one thing is, the hard thing about surveys is knowing what to measure. And the other thing is transparency in the sense of how they get their data. So the transparent popularity index tries to solve problem number 2, by opening up the data and all the code they have to crunch the numbers. And on that one, Erlang is number 27 in the all languages category. They like categorize languages by purpose, and it's number 15 in the general purpose. So the big point is that it's open data, and you can access that at the link at the bottom. Redmonk is another one. Garrett examined that last year too. Redmonk is different, at least they're more honest, in that they don't try to offer a statistical, meaningful representation. What they try to do is rank, they compare popularity on GitHub only against ranking on Stack Overflow by tags. So the idea is to correlate usage with discussion. So if you have a good correlation, you'll be on the center line. And if you're talked about but not used, or much used but not talked about, you'll be outliers. So where's Erlang? There, which is a good place to be. GitHub is newer. That came out last year, and it was more of an experiment in data visualization. What they do is they only took data from GitHub archive using Google BigQuery. And they track active repos, and per repo, the number of pushes and the number of forks and open issues and new watchers. And I highly suggest you get to that website because it's so fun to play with. This is what it looks like. Sorry if it's so small. The black line highlighted is Erlang, so they try to correlate each one. So Erlang is up there in the top 30, which is good also. And it has a healthy number of pushes per repository. And what you can do is, the data is per quarter, so you can see how it evolves quarter after quarter. This is the first quarter of 2014, second quarter, and it maintains that. So the point of all of this is that what we are seeing is linear growth in our community, in Erlang adoption, but it's not exponential, and it's not very high linear growth. Slowly but surely, there are more of us. And some things have helped, like as they mentioned in the keynote, the WhatsApp success story is very important in using that as a selling point. Elixir is also helping in bringing Erlang to the attention of other language communities, and in ensuring them that it's safe to come to our platform. But it's still not enough, because the fact remains that for small companies and companies that are not based in the main Erlang development centers, it's hard to get new hires or to have them relocate. So I didn't come here to gripe and whine and cry or harp on an established fact. We all know this. But the point is that it's hard to find new hires, but it's easy to train them. And that's what I want to talk about. So one thing that you have to take into account when training people is that there are two kinds of Erlang newbies. You have the inexperienced guy, which doesn't have much Erlang experience of any kind in industry. And then you have the experienced guy who has maybe done telco for 15 years or something like that. And each one requires a different approach to training, to onboarding. Another question from Garrett's talk last year was how many years you have been working in software? And the vast majority answered they had between 5 and 15 or over 15 years of experience. Very, very few people start learning Erlang as like a first programming language or a second or third. So what is our approach to solving this problem that we have? In a nutshell, it's choosing the right candidates, putting them in apprenticeships, because software is more like a carpentry than engineering in that sense. You need someone to guide you how to do it well. You have to give them clear guidelines for development, and improve their tooling. Erlang has traditionally suffered from crufty tooling compared to the newer ones. And give them a toy project, which is almost the most important point underpinning all of these. So the first point is selection. And this should go almost without saying. You have to choose the right candidates in the sense that motivation and passion are key factors that affect the learning process. The person that comes to learn Erlang has to want it really bad, because know-how is not absorbed by osmosis, and they need to accept the paradigm change of working with a concurrency-oriented programming language. So that ties in with Get 'em Young. Get 'em Young is not about age. This is not about ageism. It's not about how old they are. It's more about the mindset they have. There's a phrase in Buddhism that says beginner's mind, Zen mind. And what it relates to is the fact that in a beginner's mind, there are many possibilities when faced on a problem. And in an expert's mind, there are few possibilities because they know how to do stuff. They're set in their ways, and they've solved that problem before. They know what I'm doing. And sometimes carrying over those preconceptions to Erlang is not beneficial to the learning process. They'll have to break their horns against against the problem until they realize they have to change their ways. So younger programmers will suffer from a lack of skills and know-how of tools available, but they have the benefit of having those fewer preconceived notions, and you can use that in the training process to mold them in the image you need. And this is important because, like I said, Erlang presents a non-standard paradigm, and many of the design decisions that make Erlang, the language and the platform, the way it is, stem from the original domain requirements. So unless you've had these problems, unless you're trying to solve the problems that Erlang is good at solving, you don't know why those decisions were made, why they were taken. Joe and everyone else has taken a lot of time to try to explain that, but you have to be very explicit to the newcomer why you have to do things the way we do them. The apprenticeship is also key because assigning or mentor or tutor will encourage the newcomer to ask for help and reduce the time that they will spend blocked on an issue. An experienced programmer will know when to get help, how to get help, where to get help. But a new guy will just freeze up and lock and say, well, where do I find this out? If you have a guy next to him and have him under his wing, he will point him to the right direction as soon as he has a problem or as soon as he doesn't know how to do something. So it reduces the amount of time to unblock, and it also integrates the newcomer into your development team. It has them feeling they're part of the team, part of the community from the bat. Guidelines and documentation. Erlang used to suffer from serious lack of documentation. There were no books. There were nothing. Like I said, Fred came out with Learn Using Erlang that was instrumental in helping people access the language and the platform. How I Start is something newer, also by Fred and by Jose. There's a site for Elixir. And we've started a repo with a document that anyone can contribute to, trying to list the main resources, main blog posts, everything that is scattered around the web, try to have it in one place. So that's the spawn shelter. Documentation and guidelines go together. When we started growing as a team and acquiring more people, one of the issues we ran into was that everyone had their own style. So one would do things one way, the other way, just the way they had found out as they were learning, and having a common style is necessary when you're moving from one project to another. So we started bashing our heads against each other, and we decided that we needed consensus on at least basic issues. So what we decided to do was get together and vote on those issues as a team. And every decision that we made, we put it into a document, and that document is also open. It's also on GitHub. And the idea was that each rule or guideline corresponding to one of the ways that we decide to do things had to have a clear definition. It had to be as unambiguous as possible. It had to have a reasoning behind it. It had to have an example of proper compliance and an example of non-compliance. So all these issues, each one of these is important, and our process for incorporating new rules is, okay, so you have a suggestion on how to do stuff or why or change in our ways. You open an issue, you document it, we vote on it. If the majority of the team agrees, we incorporate it, and there's a pull request with all of these issues. Why are each of these important? And it's because each one of those key elements is very important in making another person understand, another person who hasn't gone through the process of thinking about those issues, why the rule of the guideline is in place, why it exists in the first place. So it gives them insight into the thought process of a more experienced developer. A guy that's new to Erlang won't know why it's bad to have a module with 150 exported functions, or why this architecture will have you run into scalability problems, why you don't have a single gen server as a choke process. So this is invaluable to the new guy because it gives them insight in how to think. In the training process, this is the moment in which you don't give them the fish, you teach them how to fish. So it's about teaching them how to think down the line once they're on their own on a real project. So we opened the document up, we posted it and shared it around. It became quite popular, but we realized that those are just our guidelines for us. We never expected adoption, although we loved new contributions, because we understand that each team is different because of the people that compose it are different, and also because the products that each team builds have different needs and different priorities. So our hope in sharing the document was that each one would use it as a basis to form their own. to inspire you to have your own documents. It's very important because these having guidelines for not only coding guidelines but also project management guidelines, like whether you have stand-ups or what are the responsibilities of each person, that reduces the amount of decisions that a newcomer has to make, and that's cognitively very important. For example, if you go to a supermarket and you're shopping for a long amount of time comparing prices, that's mentally draining, and you end up exhausted. And the reason is that each tiny decision takes a little bit of mental energy, and if you take away all of those decisions from the newcomer and say just do it this way and this is the reason why we do it this way, it frees up their mental energy to learn what's important. To give you a feeling of what that's like, I'm just going to show you just one rule from our guidelines. We like to avoid deep nesting, which means don't have a try inside a case, inside another case with a function in it. So try not to nest more than 3 levels deep. That's a bit more clearer. And it'll have a link to code in the same repo showing an example of what should not look like and what it should look like. And this is also very important because it gives them an example. They can compare it. And it's different from giving them an abstract idea like don't nest deeply and showing them visually what it should not look like. So examples are key to making someone understand something. It lowers it down from an abstract idea to a concrete idea. And it should also have a clearly enunciated reasoning behind it. So we do not like deeply nested levels because it implies that a function has deep logic. It makes many decisions, and that harms readability, it harms maintainability. That's our opinion. You might not think that way. So each one take it with a grain of salt, but for us, when a new guy comes, we say, don't do it because of this. Tooling is the second part. You've got the new guy, he's with a mentor, he's read the documentation, and you now have to give him a task. And tooling, improving the tooling is about reducing the amount of time it's spent until they get running and active and writing code. So we've attacked this problem from several angles. One is by creating a common utility library, sort of like a Swiss Army knife of code, just a grab bag of useful functions. But Swiss Army knife isn't very important, isn't very cool, so we named it Erlang Katana, which is a bit nicer. So what did we put in that? For example, a function to join a list of binaries, functions to transform from one date format to another, to process JSON, process maps, do common RPC tasks between nodes. And the important thing, this is our answer to the newbie's question, how do I do X? How do I do this? There's a ton of problems, common problems with common solutions that an experienced developer will know how to do. But a new guy, it's just not in the standard library maybe. So the idea is not just, this is not about code reuse. This library that we have, Erlang Katana, is documented. It's a requirement that the functions be documented if you want to incorporate something new. It's tested, and it has examples. So the new guy says, well, how do I do this? How do I generate a random string with ASCII characters? Well, do it this way, and this is the proper way of doing it. So like I said, examples are key. Gut is another one. It's short for Gutenberg, like the printing press. And Gut is a scaffolding tool similar to Human or Rails Generate. We tried to make it easy to use like Rebar. You just download it, put it in your path. And what it does is it'll use the GitHub API to search repos with specific tags, these repos will have like a structure with templates in it. You can use it with gut search. You get online help on the command line with good help. And what you do is you get new with the name of the repo. It'll download it and instantiate it with all the variables that you give it. And we know that there are other tools that do this. Rebar has templating, Erlang MK also. There are tons of, you can use Human if you want. But this project was started by one of our ex-coworkers as a learning tool. He had this need, he had this itch, and he scratched it. And out of this project, we gained, for example, the know-how of how to e-scriptize, how to properly e-scriptize an application. So everyone on the team gained from it. Even if we don't, not everyone uses it, everyone now knows this is how you do it. Elvis is the most interesting tool that we have. The link above is the repo for the code, and it's a service that we're now offering. It's an automated style checker similar to Ruby's Hound. We call it Elvis because he's nothing but a hound dog. So what happened with our guidelines was that as we developed them, they became extensive in the sense that there was a lot of rules. Keeping all those rules in mind when you're doing code review is hard, and it's also not fair to just give a newbie, a 100-rule guidebook and tell them, okay, memorize all these and start writing code. So what we did is we tried to automate as much as possible our guidelines by formalizing them and having a tool, check the pull requests in our code review process. It started out as a toy project for one of our more experienced new hires. He already had experience working with code, doing metaprogramming, so he wanted something more interesting. And we said, well, we have this problem, which is that code reviewing is getting tedious. Can you automate this? And it started out as a simple, a tool that he would run on his code. Then he e-scripted, made it into an e-script, so you can run it on the command line anywhere. Then we turned it into a server. The guy learned how to use the GitHub webhooks, so we made it into a service, and it just grew from there. Elvis is extendable in the sense that all you have to do is have an elvis.config file with the rules. You can add new rules if you want, implementing them. We accept whatever you will like. And some of the examples, like checking for line length, we like to have 80-column files. Some people use 120. You can configure that. That's Some people use tabs, and we don't. You can add or remove that. We don't like macros. Some people do. So these are all configurable and removable if you want. But the point is that this tool helped us to give quicker feedback to the newbie, because he'll just he'll write code, issue a pull request, and there's a bot telling him how to code. This is an example of Elvis in action. So this is a pull request on GitHub, and Elvis says the expression in line 128 and column 19 is nested beyond the maximum level of 3. So please refactor that function into something more maintainable. And we have many others. We have a ton of open source projects on the Inaka profile. SumoDB is a persistence layer because we got tired of writing the same code to access a bunch of different databases. Lassie is a web handler for the SSE server-sent event protocol. Shotgun is an extension of Loic's gun to test server-sent event endpoints, etc. All of these came out of a learning process of one of our teams. And that brings me to the main point, which is the toy project. Now, what do I mean by a toy project? A toy project is a project with the express goal of teaching the new guy, and it should have what I call Goldilocks scopes. So the project should be small enough in scope to be accomplished in the expected training time, but large enough in scope to have the new guy learn all the know-how that you need for your organization and your team. So what should be the project goals? The first is to reduce the amount of pressure on the new guy, because he won't be right off the bat on a client-facing project. It should give them an arena to practice everything that you're teaching. They should be able to make mistakes in that project. It should give them, this is very important, it should give them a mental framework. The structure of the toy project should be as similar as possible to the structure of the applications that you usually develop, whether you have a long-standing product or consultancy jobs. If you do one thing over and over, you should give them something that's very similar, so that later on they have a framework in which they can slot in new knowledge as they gain it. Like, for example, with Elvis, once he learned how to use webhooks, just incorporate that. It should give them, obviously, the familiarity with the basic design of the paradigm. So, you should teach them functional programming if they don't know that. You should teach them, everything about concurrency and, the platform. And very importantly, like I said, you're not giving them the fish, you're teaching them how to fish. So it's important to teach them consistency and self-discipline, because some of the guys that we get are very, very junior in the sense that they're not only learning how to program Erlang, they're learning how to program. So consistency and self-discipline is about writing the clearest code possible, refactoring it before it's too late, not writing just good enough code. You do that on a time-constrained project, something that just works. this is the time to set the bar high for the trainee, because you want to teach them how to do it right in the beginning and not when they're on the job. So you want to teach them to write your tests before you write the implementation if you do test-driven development. And finally, you should use that time not only to teach them how to learn Erlang, but also leverage that time to teach them how to do things the way you do it in your organization. So all the software development process elements that you have, like for example, if you use a special tool for time tracking, that toy project, even if it's toy for you because you won't get revenue or it won't be used or not, for him it will be a serious project. He has to time track that the same as he would on a real one. If you use code versioning, which I hope you do, you teach them which code versioning tool you use. If you do code review, you code review that project same as a real one, and so on. So by the time that he finishes the toy project, he should be fully aware and well-versed with all the tools that you use day in, day out. I want to give you an example of one that the last one that we did. One thing that I didn't mention is that each toy project they're not reused. It's not like you have an example like 4 in a row or Go or just some game, and that everyone re-implements it every time they come to the company. So you should tailor the toy project to the needs of that guy. Like I said, you have different kinds of profiles. You have the guy with lots of Erlang experience and the guy with none. So 4 in a row was the last project that was undertaken by the newest hire he's like not even fresh out of college. He hasn't finished college. So he's learning how to program actually. And it was very successful. The 4 in a row is also called Connect 4. Everyone knows how to play it. So how did we structure his learning process? So the first thing we taught him was obviously sequential Erlang, the functional programming. He didn't know that. So first, how to do higher order functions, etc. And his task was to implement the basic game state. How do you represent that using idiomatic Erlang, using the common data structures that you use? And how do you transform that game state in valid ways according to the game rules? After he got the basics down, we taught him concurrent Erlang, because obviously the 4 in a row is a game. It's a 2-player game. So you want to be able to have 2 players. You want to have multiple games going on at the same time. So we teach him about processes. We teach him message passing, linking, monitoring. That's, you try to look for something in the problem that you give him that will use that will leverage that. It's not about making a real, whatever. Like it wasn't about making a real 4 in a row implementation in Erlang. It was about teaching him how to do, what we do. After the basics of concurrent Erlang, we teach him the tools we use. So ODP, after he's written enough boilerplate code, so you teach him how to write a gen server. You teach him how to do common tests. We do test-driven development, so that actually went first. But what you want to do is you want to turn those modules that he started writing into a deployable application that you can give to ops. So once he has a deployable application, that's when you actually really turn the screws on and mold him in your image, in the sense, and to your needs. So for example, we at Inaka, what we do is mostly mobile applications backed by a REST API server, right? So what do we use every day? We use Cowboy, we use REST, we use server send events as a lightweight protocol to send events to the clients. So it's very important to use the tools and techniques and the libraries that you commonly use. So we teach him how to do Cowboy Web Handler. We teach him how to test that, and so on. The conclusion that I would like to make is that the title of the talk is Teaching is Learning. And that's because teaching is a learning process. Einstein said that unless you can explain it to your grandmother, you don't really know it. So if the process of handing off the know-how you've worked so hard to acquire is very gratifying, because in that process of explaining, you learn what you really know and what you don't, and you reinforce that. And the thing is that the whole team benefits from that process, because everyone learns. And time? No. Okay, so this is really effective because it's down to ground. It's concrete. The examples, the real life work, it will get the guy working in a very short period of time. So it's easy to train them. It's not a large investment. And the investment that you do make actually benefits the whole team. Everyone gains the libraries, everyone gains the tools, and everyone spreads the know-how. So we've gotten this guy to working on an actual client project in under a quarter, just 2 to 3 months. And we think that's impressive given that he's really brand new. So I hope that this is applicable to your situations. We know that every company is different, so you should tailor that process. The customization is the key. And that's about it. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you. And I would love to answer any questions that you have.
Questions in the audience? You're all training somebody who is trying really hard and is not working out. All right.
I guess it's a matter of my personal research. What's the average time of your engineers starting to write production code?
Well, it depends on the guy, obviously.
Sure, like what's your impression?
Like 2 months, maybe.
All right, that sounds fair enough. There is a lot of discussion in Russia how much it usually takes a new programmer to start writing production code, and I guess mostly they take aboard people with some real software experience, like not just students from college, and for them it's like about 2 weeks on average.
2 weeks on average.
Yeah, I guess if you count newbies in there as well, then it should be a month or 2, something like that.
Right. Well, it's important that one of the points is that if you're taking new guys, so you shouldn't be afraid to take on programmers that have no experience, because, like I said, it's not that much of an investment, because obviously they're cheaper. So if you have if you're lucky enough to get a guy that is really experienced, and all he needs is just to learn the platform and give the basics, and like I said, he knows where to go for help and how to learn something on his own. That's just great. But if you don't have that benefit, and what you have is these other guys, that also works very well. Another question?
Another question is, do you guys have any methods of measuring how effective you are as teachers, and basically like whether you should or should not change some processes of teaching people?
Well, we don't have any formalized methods, but the thing about an apprenticeship is that since you have a guy that's dedicated to teaching him, working alongside him on that project, that feedback loop is really short. So you'll know when something's not working, when he's not learning or something like that really soon, without having to do like a post-mortem of his learning process.
Yeah, thanks.
So you're saying that you have an apprenticeship. Is that a one-to-one mapping, or do you have someone training multiple people at once?
Most of our training is done by our CDO, Brujo. He's here in the first row. But sometimes when he's not busy, someone else will have him. Once we move him onto another project, maybe there's a previous guy that has already been working, so he'll work closely with that one. So it'll depend. The whole team is also very big on sharing and teaching. Everyone loves Erlang. We love explaining it. So it's important to have one guy with the responsibility of having that apprenticeship, but everyone can obviously contribute to the process of teaching him, and that also speeds up the process.
And also from the 2 months period, I spend with the guy like the first month, and then usually goes with somebody else on the team, because I stay there just for the very beginning where I'm teaching them the tools, the very basic rules of that. Once they get like used to working, they face a more complicated problem. Usually faced by other developers before. So.
Precisely.
Okay, and I have another question for you related to how you go about hiring people. Are you looking for someone with like a specific amount of experience, or do you not care, given this type of philosophy, if someone's really inexperienced versus very experienced when you onboard them?
Is this for a friend of yours?
I'm just curious.
Well, hiring is hard. Everyone knows that. Interviewing is hard. Getting the right people to the interview is hard. And I guess it depends on what you get. Obviously, we would love, just having 10 guys to choose from with everyone lots of experience. So it actually, you have to tailor the answer to that question to your communities. This is what we've come up with to do development in Buenos Aires. Maybe here in the San Francisco area, the Erlang guys growing trees. So it depends basically.
Any other question?
I have two questions for you. The first one is, do you use any form of programming test, when you're actually trying to recruit people or evaluating people?
And the interview process, you mean?
Yep. Or before the interview process, maybe?
Yes. We do. We ask them high-level architecture questions. We give them a little coding test.
Do you actually get them to program something to see that they can program before?
Yes, definitely. But it's more about, like you said, verifying that they can think and program, more than seeing if they can write.
In Ericsson, when I was there, we had a programming test, and we used to send it out to people who applied for jobs. And it was actually a bit telecom-oriented, and we also said that to explain to people they were going to have, if they had an interview, they'd have to explain the results of the test to make sure they didn't cheat and give it to someone else. It was very interesting because with this process, we never had to mark the results of the test because the people that knew they couldn't do it never bothered to send it back. The other question I had is that if you write code, after about 2 or 3 years, that code is going to have to be maintained. And the difficult bit about that is not writing comments or documentation about what has been done, but writing documentation about why it has been done.
Oh, exactly.
How do you actually make sure that the code is documented to an extent that people and new beginners understand they document the right sort of thing?
Well, like I said, we're very big on code review. So nothing goes in the code base without having a more experienced engineer look at the code and making it readable and understandable, and having the comments explain why the code is there is a requirement for the code to be accepted. But yes, those are very important issues. Another important issue that I neglected to mention during the talk is that this culture of training is not really a substitute for real training. So that's also an issue. So it's not the same as sending someone off to a 1-week course on Erlang, but it can stopgap in a measure the lack of developers, which again feeds back into going back to the higher ups and saying it's no problem. We can get guys, train them, and we can still do the projects, even though getting offers for long-term. Long experienced Erlang developers is hard.
Could you talk a bit more about the code review process?
Sorry, come again?
Can you talk a bit more about the code review process, or you keep it like positive, fresh, and?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Can you talk a bit more about the code review process?
The code review process.
Oh, the code review process. Well, we use GitHub, even for our private repos. So it's really basic actually. They'll work on their own branch. Once the code is ready for review, they'll issue a pull request, and then they have to let the person responsible know. And it's just going through the code. Sometimes it'll be together with them. Sometimes it'll be on their own. That really depends on the nature of that pull request in particular. Some are more easy, some are more complicated. If the code is more complicated, you'll have them do pair programming until it's clear. Is that where you're?
Yeah, I was more asking about like the emotional side of the thing. Like I know that criticizing, can be.
Oh,
hard
well, that's interesting. That's actually an interesting question because, I showed you our coding style guidelines, but we don't have only those guidelines. We have, company-wide guidelines, for the project managers, for everyone, and the code review process is in there, and having a positive attitude is included in that. The part I said about having them with a beginner's mind is also related to that because a guy who's not willing to be in a situation in which the code will be criticized, even though they have a lot of experience, we'll have a little bit of friction in that situation. So I guess don't hire jerks is also part of the valid hiring process. Any other questions in the back?
Yeah. Is there any plan to extend Elvis to the other Erlang language like LFE or Elixir? Do you think the syntax is too different, so it's probably better just to re-implement it in those specific languages because they'll understand themselves better?
Well, we're not using Elixir yet, but in our experience, the syntax is not the major barrier. That's mostly online. And in the sense that, like they said today, like Robert said in the keynote, the main barrier for understanding Erlang code is the semantics. Having value semantics is odd in a language, and it's more important to explain those parts than the syntax. So that hasn't been really a problem for us.
I think the question may have been more about, Elvis.
Oh, Elvis.
Yeah, so is how tied to Erlang's syntax and layout is Elvis, or is it sort of more a generic tool you could apply?
Oh, no. It's completely tied. It's for Elvis. It's for Erlang. I'm guessing, yeah.
Yeah, you can tell about Aleppo.
Oh, right. So one of the building blocks of Elvis is Aleppo, which is an alternative parser for Erlang. So it's completely tied.
Any other questions in the audience? All right, Inaki, thank you very much.
No, thank you, guys.